Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. And it is just me tonight because Christy and Chris are done with me. We've been doing a lot of recordings over the last couple of days, but this is going to be a bookend to our trip that we did on the Disney Wonder out of San Diego this past week over spring break. And in that cruise, unbeknownst to us, when we swapped from our Adventures by Disney to the sailing over spring break, one of our good friends from our Patreon supporters was going to be on it as well. And I'd like to welcome to the show. We got to sail with you and your family. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Excited to be back. Always love talking Disney Cruise Line with you guys.
So the snippet show is going to come out before this one, and then we're going to kind of put a bookend or an ending to the show, and really want to focus on your guys' thoughts on being on the Wonder on the West Coast, first time being out there, and then you guys transitioned and went up to Disneyland after that. Yeah,
it was a ton of fun. This is a trip that we had actually planned for spring break in 2020, but given COVID, it was yanked underneath us from about 12 days out. So we've been looking at this and planning for this for a long time. It was fun to finally get it done.
And cool to be able to do it, because I think this is the one thing you've got, get a Walt Disney World, and you go over and sail in the Dream, the Fantasy, and the Wish coming up here soon that a lot of people do. And it's neat that you can do that here on the West Coast for those of you who have not been to Disneyland, because this is your family's first time to Disneyland too, right? Am I right?
Yeah, correct. We've done Walt Disney World since the kids were little. We took a long break in between with park trips when we were kind of getting into cruising. And then COVID actually was the opportunity for us to kind of get back to going to the parks again, because at that time cruising was shut down. So it was fun to get out and have that experience on the West Coast too.
So just to kind of remind everybody, this is a 5-day sailing on the Disney Wonder out of San Diego. It left, the first day was a day at sea. Then we spent a day in Cabo, another day at sea, day in Ensenada, and then back to San Diego. I think that's a really good itinerary, especially Chris did a 4-day where they go all the way down to Cabo, spend the day in Cabo, and come all the way back. But I really enjoy that extra day where you stop off in Ensenada.
Yeah, I agree. It was to me, 5 days is about right. I mean, it's harder to do those shorter itineraries on the West Coast just because of where the ports are spaced, or at least to try and have a mix of ports and stuff in there anyway.
In the snippets episode, we didn't really talk about who all sailed, but who all sailed with you on this cruise?
Yeah, so it was actually our first sort of multi-generational trip this time. So my family consists of my wife Lynn, and then our 2 kids. I've got a daughter who's 15 and a son who's 13, and then my parents actually came along with us this time too. So it was really exciting to have them. My mom has been wanting to kind of cruise with us on Disney for a while. Finally was able to convince my dad to come along too. So it was my 2 parents were in one stateroom, and then we had our family of 4 in another stateroom, both balcony cabins, just a few cabins apart.
And spoiler alert, how'd your parents like it? It was fun talking to your dad, getting able to meet them that first day.
Yeah, they actually enjoyed themselves a lot. Again, my mom was kind of the one who I think probably enjoyed herself the most, but my dad, I think it's opened his eyes to sort of seeing why it is that we like Disney Cruise Line so much.
So this was your first time on the Wonder. Congratulations on the Grand Slam, and also a big milestone too. Congratulations on making what?
So it was our first time sailing gold.
Congratulations on that. That's a huge step, because it opens up so many doors. It just makes those booking windows a little bit easier when those sailings come up.
It was exciting to kind of get in and have something beyond just the Castaway Club bag in our room. Now we get the luggage tags.
You're gonna have like so many luggage tags to go along with those bags. Hopefully they're going to change it sometime soon. So, but what was your overall thoughts of the Wonder? A little bit older ship. What were your thoughts?
We'd sailed once on the Magic previously, so it wasn't unfamiliar to us, which was really nice. And I think that's something that I really like about Disney Cruise Line is sort of the consistency between the ships, to be honest with you, that everything is still very familiar, although I'd not been on that ship before. So obviously I understood the layout because of the Magic and things like that. The venues are different between, some of the dining rooms and then the bars and things like that. But for the most part, it's really consistent from ship to ship, even from the bigger ships to the little ships, as far as what the offerings are, sort of how it works. The dining rotations and familiarity. Okay, I know that if I've got early dining, then I've got the late show, or vice versa. And it just sort of understanding the mechanics of how Disney Cruise Line works, to me, I think is very consistent from ship to ship. We love the Wonder. And I see why so many people say it's their favorite ship, because it's small enough where it feels like things are close and intimate, but big enough where there's a lot of stuff for everybody kind of going on.
I like the lounges on the Wonder and the Magic, the Cadillac Lounge, and then also Keys. And one of them that I didn't expect to spend as much time as we did, but we spent a lot of time in the French Quarter Lounge this time, even with my kids, because we would stop in there. We had late dinner. We would stop in there and they'd have live music going and probably hang out for about half an hour, get an early or before dinner drink before we went to dinner. And we really loved that down there.
We spent more time there in the French Quarter Lounge than we did in the Promenade Lounge on Magic. But I think, partially it was because, number one, the theming is way better. Number two, the coffee and beignets draw every morning was fantastic. So that was how we started both of our sea days was with the coffee and beignets, which was a deal that can't be beat. But I think it's just a better atmosphere down there. And I think that as a lead in, from the French Quarter Lounge into Tiana's, it was a brilliant idea to theme it that way.
And I think they will retheme the Magic. I think we talked about that, possibly doing it to the Snuggly Duckling. But I think that will go a long way with changing that one up and making it a place where people want to go. Do you remember what the cost was for the coffee and beignets?
I think it was $5.50, something like that.
And then did you get a specialty coffee of your choice? Is that what it was? Or how did that work?
I think,
or was that just the beignets?
And I don't think it was, I don't think it mattered what coffee, because I'm pretty sure that my parents just got, regular pour over type coffee. And I was ordering, lattes, and my wife was ordering mochas and stuff like that. I think it was kind of a flat, hey, coffee and beignets for about $5. And then my son, I think actually the one time got like hot chocolate. That may have been a little bit cheaper. But admittedly, I don't pay a lot of attention to bills when I'm cruising. They hand me something, I sign it, and it goes away. Maybe I should pay more attention, but I usually don't.
You and me both, and I think that this was like one of the first times that I really didn't pay any attention. So it was just a really good time. But it's a legit coffee machine down there too, kind of similar to what they have up in the Cove Cafe.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the alternative now to like on the bigger ships where you have the Cove Cafe and the Vista Cafe. This gives you sort of that second location where if you know that the Cove Cafe is jammed, especially on maybe like a port day where people are trying to get up there early and kind of get their coffee orders in because they know they got to get off and meet in the Walt Disney Theater at 8:15 or whatever for their port adventure. So it sometimes can get really busy. That's sort of a nice secondary location where you can go and get those specialty coffee. The one thing that I was surprised by and was a little bit disappointed with, again, this is first world problems, but they didn't have the cool little Mickey shapes in the foam. Yeah. So they didn't have those because the first specialty coffee we got was in the French Quarter Lounge. And then I'm like, all right, maybe they don't have it here. We'll get it, when we go up to the Cove Cafe. And they didn't have it there either. They said the machine was broken. Now, maybe it's just that maybe it's not broken. Maybe they just don't want to deal with sort of the throughput and there's fewer, cast members to try and work it or whatever else. But it was a little bit of a letdown because I remember when we were on the Magic for Marvel Day at Sea, my wife got this awesome like Black Panther logo like right in the top of her coffee. It was the coolest thing. So we were really looking forward to some of those things. But again, the coffee was delicious.
Well, let's turn to just your stateroom really quickly. You guys are a family similar to ours. Our kids are 11. Well, 12 going on 16, so kind of similar ages there. How did the stateroom work for you? I think we had the same stateroom as far as a family veranda.
So yeah, family veranda. We generally stick with kind of our bread and butter on Disney Cruise Line is kind of 5B, 5C, kind of in those locations. I think this one was a 5C if I remember correctly when I booked it. So it doesn't have necessarily that fifth Murphy bed kind of extended stateroom, but honestly it works for us. I think the storage on the classic ships is better than it is on the newer ships. There's that nice big cabinet kind of in front of the bed that I don't think is on. It's been a while since we've been on a Dream Class ship, to be honest, or at least with the four of us and trying to cram into one stateroom anyway. But I feel like the storage is better in those rooms, and we all had plenty, and we were on there for 5 days. And actually, we had, considering the luggage that we had wasn't necessarily just for 5 days because we did that trip to Disneyland afterwards. We had probably 9 days worth of clothes with us. And still we're able to fit it, into all the drawers and things like that and closet and whatnot. So it actually worked really well for us.
It totally works for us as well, especially, when the kids are younger with that curtain, letting us stay up a little bit later, but now it's just the opposite. We usually end up going to bed before them. And I'll get up in the morning and you'd leave that curtain closed, everything like that. But definitely a lot more storage, I feel like, on the, not that it's bad on the fantasy
for sure not
or anything like that. But
the other thing that I'll point out is that, so my family are notorious overpackers. I think I shared with you before the cruise. We had 8 suitcases, right? This is not, we are not not very good at being lean packers by any means. Now it's 4 like rollerboard type sizes, and then 4 sort of medium size, like hard, checkable suitcases. So they're not massive by any means. But that said, we brought a lot of stuff and we were able to fit it all. So tons of space in there.
Okay, this was the first cruise. Well, it wasn't the first cruise, but pretty close to them taking or being able to not wear masks indoors other than the Walt Disney Theater. And then also for kids that are unvaccinated going to the kids clubs. And I think Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. What was your thoughts about them doing that? Did you feel uncomfortable at all? Any thoughts about, them taking away the masks?
So we did not feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I'll say that within our family, we were all, you all sort of breathe that sigh of relief once you kind of get through testing, and considering how low the caseloads are. And we've been a very cautious family for the most part, wearing, masking throughout the pandemic and whatnot. Kind of once we got sort of that green light to go on, we really started to sort of set that aside. And given where the caseload is right now, in the overall environment of the virus, when we were sailing, we were totally comfortable sort of, walking around without masks on most of the time. If we were in maybe a crowded setting or something like that, we put them on. Certainly we had to wear them on port adventures. And we could talk a little bit about that as we get kind of into the port adventure part of our discussion. It was fine. My son is still more comfortable wearing it. He wore his all the time. But the rest of us, for the most part, I'd usually have one with me just in case. And I sometimes try if I've got a cast member or somebody who's talking to me with a mask on, sometimes I'd put one on just as more of a courtesy. But we were comfortable considering the overall environment of the virus being maskless.
I totally agree with you on that. And I mean, it's going to change as the ships get a little bit more, as they get more crowded and they start to fill them up a little bit more. But I mean, at least for this sailing here, I never really felt like we were really that close to people, like indoors for long periods of time, other than eating. But I mean, I guess we've become accustomed to that just out here in general, going out to restaurants and stuff like that, which I know not everybody does that yet. But that was probably the only time where I really felt like we spent a lot of time close together.
We only had actually one table of our rotational dining where we were seated directly next to another family. Otherwise there was always enough of sort of a buffer, whether it was sort of like either like an aisleway or an empty table or whatever. The only one that we had like somebody literally within a few feet of us was when we were in animators. But otherwise, everything else was very well spaced. It seemed like they were being very intentional about that, about trying to still, although the capacities are starting to rise a little bit, and certainly with spring break cruises and things like that, they were being very intentional about trying to make sure that they were spacing people as best they could.
I guess I've said this already before, but if you still want to wear a mask, the good thing is there's no shaming whatsoever going on. And just like your son wearing it, nobody makes a big deal about it. If that's what makes you comfortable and you want to get out there and do it, then no hesitation, get out there and wear your mask. So
100%.
We wore it in a couple of situations too. Okay, let's stick with food. I thought personally, and I want to get your thoughts too, but I think the food has been really good since we came back. I thought the food was just as good on this cruise as the very first one. We've heard from a couple different people, and I've heard another podcast too, that some recent dream sailings where maybe the food hasn't been as good, but I thought it was excellent, on par with everything else that we've experienced in the past. What were your overall thoughts about food? And I really want to get your thoughts on Tiana's.
What I'd heard leading up to this sailing was, hey, maybe the main dining rooms actually are perhaps a little better than they had been previously, but maybe Cabanas is a step back. To me, I don't know that I would say that the food was better than what it had been in the past, but it certainly isn't a step down by any means. We were really, really happy. And this is one of the reasons that we tend to not go to Palo very much, because we're really happy with what we get in the main dining rooms. Plus, I like the overall atmosphere. But overall, I thought the food was really, really good in the rotational dining. Palo, on the other hand, is a little bit, to me, of a downgrade kind of to where it had been in the past. It was, certainly the selection, as we've been hearing, is down a little bit. For me, I think the step back would have been with cabanas. I think just the selection is down a little bit, which is, consistent with kind of what I'd heard. The quality, I think, was still okay, but the selection is down.
We left on the snippets that you guys were going to Tiana's that night. Tiana's was one of our family. Well, it's Anawakes and I's favorite. And then the kids got to go for the first time to experience Tiana's this time. And I got to embarrass my 15 going on 16-year-old because I got up and we danced, or both of us, all three of us got up and danced except for him, and went down the aisle and went down the conga line and everything like that. What was your thoughts about Tiana's?
My thought is I was the only one of our 6 that got up and danced. I was very disappointed with the rest of my table. No. So Tiana's was fantastic. And it's consistent with what I'd heard. We had a similar problem on the Magic with Rapunzel's, where the table was a little bit poorly positioned because of sight lines and columns back there. This is something that I think that'll be solved with the Arendelle dining on the Wish, when you've got a purpose-built kind of performance venue in a way that you can't necessarily do at Rapunzel's or Tiana's. But the show's a ton of fun. It's great music. Having seen Louis the alligator kind of coming through with his trumpet, that's a lot of fun. The crawfish crooners are fantastic. I had almost expected it to be louder in there than it actually was. I was afraid that it was going to be too distracting, but we had no problems hearing each other, even when the music and stuff was playing. So a ton of fun. It's our first time, obviously, with that menu. So getting a little bit of that sort of, New Orleans Cajun style kind of food was great. It was not overly spicy, which was something that I was a little bit afraid of for the rest of my family, because they are not necessarily spicy food eaters. But everybody on it was able to find something they liked on the menu. And I thought it was great.
I'm with you. I thought it was going to be a lot louder too. What is it? I'm like totally drawing a blank. There was some place that we went. Maybe I'm thinking of the Norwegian cruise that we went on that was like so loud in the dining room that you couldn't even talk or whatever. But they do a good job of being able to enjoy the music, but also still be able to talk to people at your table. And to your point too, it's kind of New Orleans food, maybe light as far as the spices go. If you really want that spice, it's not going to be that. But I thought the food was really good. And I'm trying to remember what it is. There's like a seafood like boil/soup where they've got calamari and shrimp and everything else in it. And I had that, man. That's like one of my favorites. It's a pepper pot, I think.
Yeah, they had that. I think I didn't choose that one. I can't remember what I chose though now. Wish I could remember what exactly. If I had the menu in front of me, I could probably tell you what it was. But I mean, everything I had was great. But, I think that was the night that I think my dad ordered 3 appetizers and a soup and 2 dinners and a dessert and a half. It was he couldn't choose, so they just kept bringing him stuff.
And I guess what I'm really starting to enjoy is I enjoy these themed restaurants, but I don't want it every night. So I do appreciate being able to do Triton's on the Wonder or Lumiere's on the Magic, and now it's going to be, I can't remember what it's going to be on the Wish, but kind of like that
1923 or something.
1923. So you've got that night where you've got like a good dinner and everything like that in a quality setting, but then you've got 2 other theme nights to go with it. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. To me, it gets to where it's a little bit thin if you have themes constantly. So, with this particular cruise, we had 2, quote unquote theme nights. You've got your standard pirates theme where, it was the same menu that we've been getting for years. And then this one where it's obviously it's sort of the more of a party sort of theme, but that sort of will vary by, what night you've got it. So, sometimes you may get that back to back with the pirate night. Sometimes it's going to be spread out. In our instance, pirate night was night 3, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one for us was night 5. So there was a little bit of space in there, and, was able to kind of have just some normal, normal dinners. But you've also got, animators is a bit of a show on the ships too. So it was spaced out nicely. To your point, I don't necessarily need it or want it every night, but it's fun once in a while.
How about entertainment on the ship? You had some good advice. You guys didn't quite make it up to deck 9 for the fireworks, but you were able to watch it because you're on the right side, the starboard side. So if you're booking a Disney cruise, if you can book the starboard side, you're generally going to be able to see the fireworks from your balcony if you have a balcony. What were your thoughts about the entertainment and then also the fireworks? And I gave that.
Yeah, we were notoriously falling asleep before the double-digit hours. I kept trying to stay awake, and it was never working, from either just day out in the sun or waking up early or whatever it was. But the lull of the ship putting me to sleep every night. Yeah, I thought the entertainment was great. So it was our first time seeing Frozen. It was our first. No, we didn't. We'd seen the Golden Mickeys before, right? That was one of them, and then there was the Disney Dreams or whatever. So we went to Golden Mickey's and we did Frozen. We did not see the last one with Disney Dreams. But I thought Frozen was great. It's a little bit rushed, I think, is probably the best way to put it. And I think they're trying to cram it in a longer story into an hour and 10 minutes or whatever it is. So it seemed like all of a sudden they were just jumping really quickly from point to point to point. So I wish they could spend more time with that, but understand that it's a long story to tell, and there's a lot of pieces in there that they've got to figure out how to connect. So I didn't get to see a lot of I kept meaning to try and get to some of the evening, adult entertainment, or like the comedian that was on there, or magician. We never quite made it to some of that stuff. But yeah, the one night we were trying to, we got out of dinner, and then we're super tired, and I was like, well, we'll try and maybe go up to the fireworks or something like that. And I fell asleep in the bed, and all of a sudden I started hearing the booms outside of the window, and I'm like I shot out of bed. I was like fireworks. So like we all like rushed out to the balcony, and we were on deck 6, right? So the pool deck is on 9, so it's a few decks above us, but we could hear the music, we could see the fireworks. I mean, so I'd say we probably saw 80% of the show by the time we got out there. And they're not very long anyway at this point. So we could hear the Disney music and stuff playing. It's probably different when you've got the pirate show and there's actually like action going on the deck that you kind of want to be there to see. But, for me, with the presentation that they're doing now, I don't know. It was kind of nice to sort of be done with the fireworks, and it's all right. Well, crawling back in bed. Good night.
I've got like the night before Christmas in my head as you're talking about that, like with Santa landing on the roof and him throwing that the whatever it was. I'm losing my old English words and everything like that, but he goes running to the window to see Santa. You went running to the balcony to see the fireworks.
Yeah, threw open the sash.
Threw open the sash. That's what I was looking for. Okay. We went to the comedian in the evening. We didn't catch his actual show. I wish we would have caught it. I think that was the night we went to Palo. So we weren't able to catch it. We didn't get any of the regular shows just because we'd just been on the Wonder. So Anawik and I had seen Frozen, but I do enjoy that show. But to your point, it is short because they got to cram it into an hour. But the comedian was really good. And we got to see him down in Azure to do the kind of adult show. And he had a really fun show for that. So I'm glad to see them bringing that type of entertainment back.
I think what we've learned is that we get tired after dinner, regardless of whether it's early dining or late dining, just because of the amount of food. I think that so either I need to self-meter myself so I can try and stay up a little bit later, or just start booking late, which normally we do book late dining, but for this one, with my parents traveling with us, an 8:15 dinner was going to be not popular. So.
I totally understand that. Okay, let's turn to the port adventures. We talked about Cabo and your experience there, being able to see the whale, spending time on the beach and everything like that. Before we talk about what we did in Ensenada, what were your overall thoughts about stopping in Cabo and Ensenada as kind of different ports versus the Caribbean?
Yeah, different ports. So for us, I think I hate to say that ports are similar for us, but for the most part, they offer generally similar types of excursions and port adventures. You got your beach ones, you've got your dolphin ones, you've got your, hey, go ride an ATV. You've got the maybe some adventurous ones with, horseback riding on the beach, and they kind of generally offer similar stuff. So for us, we generally cruise for those ships, just for the overall cruise experience. That said, I liked Cabo and Ensenada. It's, I think you mentioned it on the snippet show. They're a little bit, the ports are more limited on the West Coast with not having a slew of islands that you can sort of, sail to and stuff like that. But for us, with the way that we cruise and then how we sort of enjoy cruising in general, it works for us. So I wouldn't hesitate to go back. What I'd like to see is, and I think that right now the offerings on those port adventures are still a little bit limited because they're still bringing on some of the tour operators. Even I think our guy that was in Ensenada mentioned, hey, Disney's kind of been slower than others to kind of spool back up on certain ones. They were only offering, I think, 2 at that time, at least through his tour company. So I think as the offerings get better, as we sort of recover and things start to normalize a little bit, that there could be more interesting things to do. That said, we enjoyed what we did, and in some cases might even do it again.
I've always wondered, the people that have cruised down to Nassau like about 1 million times, something like that, like how do they do that? And Anawik and I we were talking about this the other night. It's like, I don't know why Ensenada speaks to us, but we love that. It's like super easy. There was another ship there, but it's never really super crowded. It's easy. You walk on, you walk off and everything like that. they're bringing it back, like you said, a few more different things to do. But I see that being a place that we're going to be to quite a few times in our future. Well, so Ensenada, we ended up doing a port adventure with your family. Went down to La Bufadora, did some sea kayaking out on the ocean. I was a little worried that I maybe oversold it, but what were you guys' thoughts about the sea kayaking?
No, we liked it. And actually, I've got you to thank for doing this one, because I remember we talked, God, probably well over a year ago, about the time that you and Wake had gone and done kayaking and stuff down there, and it sounded really cool. It's something that we were doing a beach day in Cabo, so I was looking for something a little bit different to do. And what actually one of our favorite port adventures ever was a more adventurous one that we had done in Jamaica, which is the Dunn's River Falls, that climb sort of up the waterfall and stuff like that, a little bit more of an adventurous type thing. So I was looking for something that was in that sort of space. And this one really, was kind of neat. So I had a chance to obviously, get an incredible vantage point to sort of a natural wonder and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. The one maybe miscalculation that I as a parent made is that my daughter, who tends to get a little bit of motion sickness, maybe that wasn't the best choice for her for a port adventure. So and I'll say that overall the ocean I didn't think was that bad. Certainly when you're in that bay and you're kayaking out and you get outside of sort of the wall of that bay, it's still pretty protected. But once you get outside of that, you start getting the sort of up and down motion of the ocean, where you're sort of like 1 second you're looking at a wall of water, and then the next thing you know, you're kind of looking at like a cavern below you. It's gradual, but enough where she was starting to get a little bit dicey with her stomach and stuff like that. But she was a trooper, and she pulled through and enjoyed it. But that said, it was a little bit dicey for her from a motion standpoint, but really fun. The guides were awesome. The drive out there was maybe about 45 minutes or so to get out to the thing. They were really well organized. They had, when we rolled up, they had, probably about 15 or 20 kayaks all lined up, ready to go on this gorgeous black sand beach, with all these cool homes and stuff kind of on the bluffs around us and whatnot. They were super safety conscious about making sure that you were okay, and sort of traveling as a team and making sure that they had somebody with you at all times. It was sort of had their eyes and stuff on you. Anyway, I thought they were really impressive, and it would, again, I would totally do that again. It was a lot of fun.
It was a much bigger group this time than the first time we went, so it took them a little bit longer to get everybody out. But like to your point, I thought they were super safety conscious and helping everybody out there. What do you think of the La Bufador itself? It's a blowhole, so it's a cave it's an underwater cave that once it fills up, when the water needs to escape, it shoots out kind of a hole to the top, and you get kind of a spectacular view of it. What do you think of that?
That was really cool. So especially we're sort of towards the end of the kayak. So we kind of went out and we went around this rock and little rapids and stuff, then sort of came back in. And to sort of be able to go right up against that as this thing is getting ready to blow, it was really, really cool. And just the sort of like noise and stuff that it makes when once that pressure is releasing from inside there was really, really cool to get to see up that close. You've got people that are up on top of the bluff or whatever it is, that they're sort of getting that from top down look at it. But to be down there, like on the water, and then you could see the ocean sort of swell into that corner a little bit, and then you could tell, all right, this is gonna be a big one, right? And then all of a sudden, just boom, the thing just blasts out of there. Really, really cool to see.
If you're a lawyer, don't hate me for saying this, but I think like when you go to Mexico, they bring you as close as they can to be able to experience it and see that. And it kind of reminds me of Norway when we went to Stavanger, and you can go up to Pulpit Rock, which is this really famous rock, and there's no railings whatsoever. People are like got their feet dangling over the side. And I think in America, there'd be like about 1 million signs, do not come close to the edge, and you do not come within a mile of the La Bufador. Otherwise, somebody's been sued for it. So
that fence that they had up there trying to keep people back didn't necessarily look like the the sturdiest thing either.
No,
so yeah.
no. And this is no shade whatsoever to the people, to this tour whatsoever, because they do it very safely. I never once felt like we were in like an unsafe position, and you get a great view of just a spectacular, and you're not leaving a mark on the environment and doing it either, by being on the kayaks, I thought. So
yeah, it was really good.
Did I mangle that too much? Am I gonna hear from that?
No, you won't hear anything about that.
All right. I guess before we turn to Disneyland and your time up there, Chad, any other thoughts about sailing on the Wonder, sailing out of San Diego? Anything that we didn't talk about?
I'm trying to remember where we left it all off, but again, the Wonder has been my white whale that I've been trying to schedule for 2+ years. So it was fun to finally get that done. We've got pictures of our kids with the atrium statue in each of the three ships, and I remember I made a collage leading up to that 2020 group of like, all right, this was our first one in 2016, 2017, 2019, and then 2020, this is gonna be the one where we finally fill this thing out. So finally getting to take that picture was with them and with the Ariel statue there was kind of a neat moment that we actually didn't get to do until literally we were in the line to disembark from the ship. We're like, all right, we got to do this. This is our last chance. We got to get this done. So we had a bunch of randoms around the kids as we were trying to get off the ship, because people just, they're sitting anywhere that they can find a space waiting to get off. But anyway, it was really neat to finally get the Wonder under our belts for sure.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoy her as much as we do too. And I'm glad that she's out here on the West Coast for us. All right, let's turn to Disneyland, the second half of your trip. You guys took a train up from San Diego. We were kind of texting as you guys got off. You're a little nervous as far as getting off and getting over to the terminal itself. It's not too far away. I think it's just a couple of blocks. How did that work out?
Yeah, it's about a 2-block walk. So not terrible at all. I think when we Google mapped it, it was like a 9-minute walk or something like that. So not too hard to get to. So with past cruises, it seemed like they were, ready to kick you out. I mean, like the last people were pretty much leaving the ship by about 9:30. And with this one, we had scheduled a 10, I think it was like 10:02 or 10:07 train. And I'm thinking, all right, no problem. We'll be off the ship easily, by 9 o'clock. And then we'll hop over there and then go get on the train. Well, breakfast was a little bit wonky because I think partially because the crew had some sort of a all crew kind of inspection that was going on with customs or something like that. So breakfast service in the morning was slower than it had been in the past for us. So like our waiter, like they brought our coffees or something like that, but then our waiter, we didn't see him again for probably another 15 minutes. And we're just sort of waiting. I'm like, we got to place these orders. We got to get out of here. So knowing that we wanted to get off the ship sooner rather than later. And I was starting to get really, really nervous. And, we had left our bags up in our room, because our cabin attendant had basically said that our stateroom host, excuse me, had said, sure, no problem. Go ahead and leave them here. Come pick them up after you're done with breakfast. Because we were rolling off just our roll-on bags, but we had checked our 4 big suitcases. Those were going to be waiting for us downstairs. So we went back up, got our bags, and then got down in this enormous line to get off the ship. Now that said, it moved pretty quickly, from the time that we got in line, which was honestly almost to the French Quarter Lounge when we got in, to the time where we got through customs and got our bags was probably only about 40 minutes. So it wasn't that bad, but it was really scary for a little bit of a period there where I was like, I don't know if we're going to make this train. And the question is, how am I going to get to Disneyland if I don't make this train? There's another one that's at like 2:00 or something like that, but we've got park tickets today. I don't really want to light those on fire. I would like to be in the park today. How, what's our sort of our backup plan to get up to Anaheim in that case? That said, it was a moot point. We got to the train station with enough time, and they started lining us up at about 9:45 to go get on the train. We had booked business class tickets because, number one, we knew we had 8 suitcases, and I figured they'd be a little more lenient with us than all the bags if we had business class tickets. Plus the seating spaces are a little bit bigger, and I'm thinking, okay, well, if they don't let us have the small ones in the luggage racks, then hopefully we can either store them over there or keep them with us at our seats or something like that. So the way that it worked out was they let the business class passengers board first. There were 2 cars. Everyone really rushed for that first car. That car had like a restroom on the main floor with some seating there, but then there was an upstairs, which is where we went to. So we put our bags into the luggage rack on the main floor, and then we went upstairs, and then we're able to put our roll-on ones in like an overhead bin in the same way that you do on an airliner. So plenty of space up there. In business class, they offer included. I'll use the podcast term. Included like juices and pastries and things like that and waters for business class passengers, which was nice. There was also a food car that was about 2 cars down that we grabbed some sandwiches and stuff at to have some lunch and stuff as we were on our way up, because we were getting there a little bit short of noon. So we grabbed some food on there. just, prepackaged sandwiches. And I think they had some hot dogs you could throw in a microwave. Nothing fancy, but enough to kind of get us by. We sat on the left side of the train. So, there's periods where you're literally like going basically almost right up the coast. The water had some chop to it. So there were a bunch of surfers and stuff out there, like what felt like miles of surfers, just like, all kind of surfing together and stuff like that. Some of them, you could see them like catching mid wave and stuff like that. So that was really cool to see. But it was about a 2-hour ride from San Diego to get up to Anaheim. And that dumped you into the Anaheim. It's like, I can't remember the name, like Anaheim Regional Intermodal Station or something like that. So it's sort of where all their taxis go in and out of, and trains and different things like that. So we got there, called an Uber, and then we were to our hotel, just walking distance from Disneyland, within 15 minutes. So super convenient. I think I mentioned on the Snippet Show, everything about this trip is super convenient, with, being able to have the port, our hotel be across from the port, for being able to walk to the ship the next day, for being able to go out for dinner and drinks the night before the cruise, walking to that Little Italy area, the train station being right there, a quick Uber ride over to Disneyland, and then we're walking distance to Disneyland. It's a very different experience for how, if you were to try to do a land and sea vacation on the East Coast, where now you've got a lot of logistics that you've got to figure out, because the distance to the port is so far, and there's no, car services are everywhere, but still you've got to be a lot more intentional, I think, with that.
I don't want to put this thought into your head, but to me, Walt Disney World versus Disneyland, and just thinking about what you said about coming up from San Diego, if it all works out, which it did for you guys, thank goodness, which I'm sure some people may have some hiccups at times, but with some amazing scenery and everything else, to me, Walt Disney World is just like this slow, here we go, and then we're going to go over here, and it takes some time to get over there, and then you get over here, and I don't know. So that when you go to Disneyland, it's like, well, there's a park over here, there's a park over there. It's like, hey, let's go ride this, and we're going to go over to DC and do this, and we're going to come back over there and go do that. And it's just, I just feel like the West Coast is like, overall in general, is just like a little bit user friendly. But
I agree. It was neat because we had those park hopper tickets, and then when we had the Genie Plus, right? So
right,
and everybody's got their opinions of Genie Plus, right? I think it works way better on the West Coast. Number one, because your rides are closer. Whereas at Walt Disney World, you've got, so they have if I can remember reading this, I think there's more rides at Disneyland than there are in the Magic Kingdom. There's number of rides and stuff like that.
Definitely for sure. But I know that
the spacing between them is so much tighter, because that's a smaller park, right? So you can, hop in a lightning, grab a lightning lane, and then get off of another ride, and then be able to like grab another lightning lane and be on something within minutes. Or because you've got the park hopper between those, you can grab a lightning lane over at the other park and literally be over there in a handful of minutes also, and be like, all right, well, I'm going to go ride Splash Mountain now. Okay, well, now I'm going to go over and ride, Toy Story Mania or something like that, or whatever else, right? So you could hop there and quickly be able to pivot from park to park, and not have to hop on. You go, okay, well, I'm going to walk, a half a mile to get to the exit of this park, and now I've got to go stand in the line for the buses. Yeah. And that's going to take, 20 minutes for the bus to roll around. It's going to be another 20 minutes for me to get, right. You get the point.
Exactly. Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot, which is why I didn't invite Chris on here. So you couldn't strong arm me, anything like that. But, first time at Disneyland, Disney California Adventure, I'm not going to say which one is better. What are your thoughts between Disneyland, Disney California Adventure, and Walt Disney World, just overall?
I think that as much as here I was throwing shade at sort of how quickly you can bounce from park to park, they're very different as far as the overall experience goes. I think the food is better at Disneyland for sure. Even like the quick service, just the amount of spaces. Now, we were there during Food and Wine, so there was a California Adventure, so a ton of unique offerings and stuff that were going on there because of that. But the ability to sort of get around from park to park is the thing that for me that sets Disneyland apart from Walt Disney World. A lot of the same attractions, although what I'll say is, I think with the exception maybe of Splash Mountain, I think we liked all of the attractions at Disneyland better than the ones that were at Disney World. And that was not something that I expected. I knew that they were different, but I didn't think it to be like such a landslide for us. And I'll say that was consistent with other people in our family too. So the same thing, that everyone really preferred the rides at Disneyland. Now, maybe that's just because they felt more fresher for us because you've been on those other ones so many times. And hey, now it's a little bit of a new twist or experience on those things. But overall, I mean, I could see us going to Disneyland more often now that we've done this, because to me, it was such a pleasant experience with being able to do so many things in such a short amount of time. We got there midday on day one. So we had a 3-day park ticket. And then we did, like, day 2 was a long day. We were there from, and my kids at this point, I can't get them to rope drop anymore. So it was, all right, let's leisurely get up, but then we'll stay later into the evening kind of stuff. Is kind of the way that our family is these days, because with teen kids, they're just getting them up in the mornings is not going to happen. So we got there at like 11 or so on day 2, and then stayed until 11 or midnight that day. So that was a long park day. The next day, anytime we're in California, we've got to go grab In-N-Out Burger. So we went and grab some In-N-Out Burger for lunch, and then got over to the parks at about 1:30 and stayed till 9 or so. I probably could have done one more day, to be honest with you, because I felt like there were still some things that we would have liked to have repeated a little bit. We got everything that we wanted to really get done at least once, but I wouldn't have minded probably one more day there, especially as a first time visitor, where you're really trying to sort of take it all in and stuff like that. There were probably parts of California Adventure that we didn't get to because we were kind of hopping more from ride to ride, but really, really great experience, and could see ourselves going there again for sure.
Good points there. So if your kids are older, like our kids are with you and your kids are, it's a little bit easier to go back and forth between the parks. Having those park hoppers, you can really do a lot of different things. And the other difference, I think that after you go there several times, I think 3 days is like the perfect amount of time to spend at Disneyland versus Disney World. It can be a whole week-long vacation that you can spend down there as well. Obviously, there's other things you can do in California when you're down there. So let's just turn to the two parks themselves. You want to start with DCA or you want to start with Disneyland?
Let's start with DCA. That's where we started.
All right. What stood out to you as far as ride goes? And I really want to hear your thoughts about Spider-Man, Radiator Springs, and possibly Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout.
Yeah, all of those were great. So let me start with, so one of our family we're big Marvel family. So, if there is a Marvel film, we're going to be there on day one. If there's a Marvel series, we're watching this basically as soon as it comes out, stuff like that. So we're big into this. So that was a huge thing that we were really looking forward to for this trip. So when we found out that, I think actually this was a bit of a fortunate break for us, because when we scheduled that March of 2020 trip, it wasn't going to be open by then. And when the pandemic hit and then they reopened, it was like, all right, now we're actually going to be able to get this experience to go to the Avengers campus. I thought that the new Spider-Man ride, we were, with us, this being our first time there and having not done some of these rides, we were willing and accepting of paying the upcharge for both Genie Plus and for any of the upcharge rides. I get that some folks, wouldn't necessarily do that, but for us, it was sort of a time is money kind of thing. And we don't know when the next time we're going to be out here is. And we don't want to spend our time sitting in the lines. We've spent X amount of dollars on this trip already. Well, what's another, $80 for this or whatever. So for us, we had no problems doing that. So that was actually our very first ride that when we got to DCA was we went and did Web Slingers. Really fun. I'll say that because of the action that you're required to do. So the way the ride is, the premise of the ride is basically you're trying to help Spider-Man gather up all these spider bots, right? And you're literally slinging webs with your arms, right? You're really focused on trying to sling all this stuff back and forth. I feel like you miss out on some of the ride, to be honest with you, because you're so like focused on like just like swinging your arms all over the place that you sort of like miss a lot of what's going on kind of around you. And my arms got really tired. So it but by the end of that 5 minutes or whatever, like my shoulders were just cooked from like constantly slinging these webs like back and forth and back and forth. So to me, it was an okay attraction, but probably not. It's certainly not on the level of a Rise of Resistance or things like that. At least in my opinion.
Avengers Campus overall, what did you think of it?
Avengers Campus overall, the theming is really, really good. It's a little bit small. At least it feels small for me. So, and I know they had to sort of fit within the space of what a Bugs Land was. What I was really impressed with was the characters are everywhere. So there's constantly, Black Widows, patrolling the top of the Avengers compound, or Ant-Man and the Wasp are kind of standing out, or, Captain Marvel's over here on top of the Avengers Jeep and, kind of taking pictures and stuff like that. The Dora Milaje from Wakanda are out there like doing stuff all the time. So they like every time we were in that area, there was some sort of a character out doing stuff. They've got a really neat, kind of battle sequence thing that goes on top of the Avengers headquarters that they do periodically throughout the day. Where I'm spacing on the name of the villain from the Black Widow movie.
Why am I totally drawing a blank too? Man,
Anyway, so it comes out and they're basically trying to like steal this stuff from the Avengers headquarters that's on the Quinjet and stuff like that, and Black Widow's there and Captain America's there, and they're trying to stop them. So it was Taskmaster, that's the name of it. So Taskmaster's there with his henchmen and stuff like that. So that, there's a whole fight sequence and stuff up there. So really, really cool stuff. There's another sort of thing where Spider-Man comes out and he's doing his test jumps, where if anybody's seen the Disney Plus series about, I think it was the Imagineering story or whatever, they showed like the one of the last episodes was this sort of autonomous flying robot thing. Pretty clear that from looking at it that it was going to be sort of a Spider-Man type thing, and that's what that winds up being. But it's like seeing that thing like sling its way through the air is really, really cool. But overall theming for the land is spot on. Again, a little bit small, especially when you consider the new part. Then you get to sort of the older part, which is where the Guardians mission breakout is at. But really neat stuff. I know that they've got room in there for one more attraction in the Avengers headquarters. At some point, they were supposed to do some sort of a Quinjet ride that was going to be in there. That was not meant to be there at launch, but sort of an expansion later on. So we'll get back out there whenever it is for sure that they do that.
I think when that comes back, I haven't been to Avengers Campus yet, but once they get that there too, I think it's really going to add to it. What was your thoughts of Mission Breakout?
Fun. So we are, again, of all the Marvel properties, I think Guardians is probably actually my favorite, and a ton of fun. The Tower of Terror for us is just okay, but you add in the Guardians and just the overall presentation that they kind of do in there, because the whole premise is that you're kind of in the collector's collection. That was one thing I'll say, is that the Genie Plus, when you go through the lightning lane, robs you of some of the queue. So when we did it a second time, we actually made sure that we went through the regular line because we wanted to see the items that were in the collector's collection. So it feels like you miss out on some of that stuff with the Genie Plus lightning lane. But really, really cool. And the music and just the overall the sequence with the drops, with the way that they're kind of doing it, is, to me, it's more fun than what you get on Tower of Terror.
I think it's 180 degrees. I mean, I think Guardians of the Galaxy is so much fun, and Tower of Terror is a thrill. But I think they really hit it out of the park with that one. I know Chris from 100%. California, that's like one of his favorite rides too. And I love being able to see the dog. I can't remember the dog's name. The Russian dog that got sent to space first as being part of the collectors.
Oh yeah, Laika. It was. I think it was actually named Laika, but yeah, I think they called it something else. I think in Guardians, Cosmos or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. Just kind of a neat ride. Cars Land at night. Did you guys make it over there?
We did. So this is where I say that I wish I had another day, because honestly, we rushed through Cars Land to get over to because we had a lightning lane pass for Radiator Springs, and we sort of rushed to get there, and it was almost towards the end of the night. So we didn't get to see or experience a lot of, what Radiator Springs had to offer. So I wish we'd have been able to spend more time there. But overall, the theming, like as I've heard from so many people, is just incredible. The detail and stuff that they've got there, and the different, the Cozy Cone Motel, and Luigi's Tire Shop, and all the different cool things and stuff that are there. It's all so familiar, having seen those films so many times, but really, really fun. The Radiator Springs Racers, to me, of the two upcharge things that we did at DCA, was 100% the worth the $18 or whatever it is that we paid for that. It was a ton of fun. To me, I liked it way better than Test Track, just from the overall theming standpoint. Just the animatronics and stuff, when you get to like the cars actually like Mater in there talking to you, are incredible. Yeah. Like you really feel like you are like right in this thing, and then all of a sudden they take you out to the race part and you are flying in the same way that you do on Test Track. Just really, really fun. So that whole attraction that was a highlight for all of us.
We've only won the race once, which is our kids.
We
like,
won.
Did you win? Oh, look at you guys go.
Yeah,
I'm going with you to Vegas, man. We've only won once. All right. We're kind of getting a little bit long on time here. So let's get over to Disneyland. Kind of overall thoughts at Disneyland. Unfortunately, Pirates was down. I know that's a highlight for a lot of people, but what stood out for you guys at Disneyland?
Yeah, Pirates was down. But I think that the overall word I would say for that is familiar. I think it's really familiar considering the layout of the Magic Kingdom and stuff like that. There are obviously different attractions, but Tomorrowland is over to the right, and this stuff is Jungle Cruise over to the left, and so it felt very familiar compared to DCA's. Obviously, there's really no comparison to that in Florida. But overall, I what I really liked, again, we're kind of getting some of the same themes, but just the easy accessibility of some of these things. I mean, you could jump from ride to ride to ride and sort of be right on top of stuff. But overall, the crowds weren't too bad. I mean, obviously, the last time we were at Walt Disney World was the week between Christmas and New Year, which was just almost suffocating at times during certain parts of the day. Even being spring break, it never felt nearly as crowded as I feel like we felt it at Walt Disney World last time. But overall, I mean, the castle is very much smaller. That you hear it from people about how much smaller it is, and you're like, yeah, okay. And then you get there like, whoa, that thing is really small.
Itty little castle.
It's a little baby castle. But overall, again, really familiar. You got the carousel right on the back side of it and stuff like that. So I thought it was great.
Any rides stand out for you guys over there that you rode on? Anything else beyond?
I thought Space Mountain is smoother at Disneyland. Maybe it's just because the cars are wider or something like that, or the track or whatever. But
if I remember right, I think they redid it more recently than Walt Disney World, so it is definitely smoother than Walt Disney World.
Yeah, the one at Walt Disney World beats me up almost in the same way that the Matterhorn did for me on this particular one. So if you ever need your spine adjusted, feel free to go ahead and take a ride on the Matterhorn. But I think they again, I think as we thought through, like things like Big Thunder Mountain, Splash Mountain, maybe not quite as I feel like I like the one at Walt Disney World a little bit better. Although obviously both of those are getting rethemed shortly. Galaxy's Edge is nearly identical. The one thing I'll say there is that it feels that so Galaxy's Edge, when you get to Disneyland past about 7:00, the place empties out. At least it was for us. And we went. We were watching kind of some of the lines, and my son and I were trying to decide whether to ride Rise of Resistance by ourselves while our ladies were going to go shop. The ladies of our family were going to go shop. So we kind of jumped over there, and there was a 60-minute wait for Rise of Resistance. And I'm looking, I happen to subscribe to the Touring Plans Lines app, and they're saying, hey, it's posted 60, but expected wait is 43 minutes. We were to the pre-show within 20-25 minutes, and off of that ride, like in line and off the ride within 45. So totally worth our time, considering it's a 20-minute ride. For me to wait, 20 minutes to basically start the pre-show for that is a steal, in my opinion. So, all those places that we've sort of missed out on over the years because we'll tend to leave the park early with a younger kid. Now that we're getting to see all those lit up at night, whether it's Cars Land or whether it's Galaxy's Edge or Avengers Campus and stuff like that, that park it feels very different in the evening, versus kind of during the packed part of the day.
I will say this about Disneyland. I was kind of surprised with the times that you were talking about during spring break, because it can get pretty busy down there in spring break. Maybe it was a one-off for you guys, but in general, in normal times, the Monday, Tuesday. So you got there on Sunday, right?
We got there on Friday.
So you were there on the weekend.
Yeah.
Wow.
Friday wasn't too bad. Saturday was busier. That was probably our busiest of the days, which understandably, because you've got, all the locals and stuff are there and whatnot. Sunday night is probably and that was where we did the Rise one. That was where it really started to empty out. I think that at that point, the locals have all decided to go home. Like after dinner on a Sunday night, to me, that was the best park experience we had, was once that was all done.
I wish Chris was right here, because I think he could speak to it. But I think, like, as you're talking about Sunday night, and what we've experienced too in the past is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. there's not a lot of people there. Those are like the best times if it can work into your scheduling. Obviously, the Fridays, Saturdays, with, as you said, kind of being a locals park, they're going to be a little bit busier.
Yep.
I guess you've touched on a lot of different things, having a park hopper, using Genie Plus. Any other advice for visiting Disneyland from what you or the Disneyland Resort from what you guys experienced?
No, I think the biggest thing is the off-site hotels in many cases are closer than perhaps some of the on-site ones. So for instance, the we had originally booked the Park Place Inn, like literally like right across from the harbor entrance and stuff over there. We moved to a different one just because we were trying to pile up some rewards miles and stuff like that. So we moved to a different hotel that was maybe about a half a mile walk. So I think, especially if you're traveling with kids that may need a break during the day, try to make sure that you've got, a hotel that's close and stuff like that, in the same way that hey, maybe you may need a break during the day of a Walt Disney World trip and you go back to the hotel. The lack of with those hotels is the pools just aren't, you're not going to get the cool big pools and stuff like that you get at the Walt Disney World resorts, with the exception of certainly Disneyland Hotel and Grand California have amazing pools, but those are going to be a lot more money than what you're going to pay for some of the offsite hotels. But for us, it worked great to be able to sort of walk right from where we were at. We were over by the convention center at the Residence Inn. So for our family, we need 3 sleeping spaces with the teen kids and stuff like that. So having that sort of Residence Inn where you've got a pull-out couch and 2 beds and stuff like that. So we were a little bit limited on which places we could stay at to give us that amount of space. But it, again, really accessible, fun to get to, easy walk to and from the parks. Would totally do it again.
One last question. We were talking about this ahead of time. You guys were recently on a Royal Caribbean cruise before you sailed with Disney Cruise Line. It's been a while since your family had been on Disney Cruise Line. What did your family think between the two of them?
I waited to ask the kids this until after both of these sailings were done. We actually talked about it at dinner tonight, trying to sort of see like where their heads were at for future cruises and stuff. Our next cruise is on the Wish. But past that, we don't have anything else booked. So the question becomes, what are we going to start to do at this point? Is it are the kids getting more enjoyment, on Royal Caribbean? Because we were able to sail with 2 staterooms for the price of 1 on Disney Cruise Line. So now the staterooms are smaller. I'll say, at least on Oasis of the Seas when we were sailing, but the kids were able to have sort of their own space, dedicated beds. So it was a little bit different experience for them. Surprisingly, and even though they're teens, they both said that they prefer Disney Cruise Line. And I'll say that I would say the same for me. And it's not that we didn't enjoy our week on Oasis of the Seas. It was a bit of a bucket list cruise for me because I'd always wanted to get on, one of those Oasis class ships. We've docked with them, next to them, either with Dream or Fantasy over the years, and said, hey, someday I'd like to try one of those out. We loved our time with it. But what I'll say, and I think I mentioned this to Christy actually the other day too, is I think the thing that I like about that sets Disney for me, number one, the service is better. And I didn't want to necessarily judge Royal on that right away, because understanding that they don't necessarily have all of their staffing levels back yet. So I wanted to sort of give them a little bit of grace on that, saying, okay, maybe I'm unfairly comparing them to Disney because, they just haven't staffed up yet or whatever. And I'll see what Disney's like. To me, the service on Disney was every bit as good as we ever got previous to the pandemic. So to me, then that becomes not a non-issue. But so I'll say the service I think was better. And then the food, was in the main dining room with Royal, I thought was also very good. The problem for me with dining on Royal is that I've got to put a lot more thought and effort into it. With Disney, I know what the dining rotation, I know I'm going to show up. They're going to assign me my dining rotation. They're going to tell me where to go eat. And part of the reason I like cruising is because it's easy. I don't have to plan anything, other than like setting up which excursion I want to do in advance. With Royal, I've got all these things I got to think about. What dining package do I want to get? What drink package do I want to get? And then you got to get on the ship and you got to chase to a specialty restaurant and start choosing all of your meals. Okay, what time am I going to eat, and where am I going to eat at, and what's my order that I'm going to eat these things, and which restaurants do I want to try, and which nights, and where we were trying to work it out with another family that we were sailing with. I think Disney for me is so familiar that I can relax. in a way that I wasn't able to on the Royal. And maybe that's again because it's the first time we sailed with Royal Caribbean. It was new, and felt like I was still learning, like into day 4, trying to figure out what all the stuff was. But given this is our 6th cruise with Disney, again, sort of the familiarity from ship to ship with how things work and how it runs allows me to sort of relax in a way that I wasn't able to on Royal Caribbean. And again, if my kids are not unhappy having to bunk with mom and dad in one room, we're not in there that much anyway, we're there to sleep. Then for me, I think we'll continue to choose Disney Cruise Line for it. Not to say that we wouldn't ever sail with Royal again, but I think we're going to continue to choose Disney Cruise Line for most of our stuff.
Was it a familiarity with your kids too, as to why they like Disney better?
Could be. I think that, so neither of them are big into the kids clubs. I don't know that either one of them set foot into the clubs the entire 5 days that we were there, nor did they do much with that stuff on the road. I think they like having sort of their independence, which we were comfortable with that on Royal as much as we were with Disney. There's more of a, with the casino and, maybe a bit more of a drinking atmosphere and stuff like that on Royal, but nothing that was uncomfortable by any means. That said, I think that, they more or less like that we kind of give them their freedom on the ships. So for them, I think the interaction with the waiters, I could see them, they always really enjoy that. They're making flowers for my daughter or whatever else it is. She brought that paper flower home, right? So that made it all the way through the airports and everything else. I think there's just a different level of just fun that they get, and they're sort of the ability to maybe be a little bit of a kid again.
No, I think those are all good points there. I think that's why our kids kind of gravitate towards it as well. So Chad, I know you talked about the Wish being your next cruise coming up. That's later this summer. I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to cruise with you guys again. It was a lot of fun meeting Lynn and your kids and being able to spend some time with you guys.
Well, there'll be another time.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll figure it out.
I just want to throw this out there. We as a podcast have got a wide range of people that listen to the show, but we've also known that people who love Disney Cruise Line and get to cruise often, and are lucky enough to cruise often, or make a point to cruise often. You kind of said this on the ship, where it's kind of a small but a fun community. And I really did appreciate the last couple of cruises being able to cruise with Chris and Ed on the Wonder down in New Orleans, and also meeting you guys and being able to do that. And that's really what has changed why we look forward to going on Disney Cruise Line as well.
Yeah, the community is small, but a lot of really great folks. I've been lucky enough to sort of have the same, cruise with people on multiple trips in the past. Our friends that we were with on Oasis of the Seas, we met them on our first cruise in Fantasy in January of 2016. And this is our 4th cruise with them. The second one was unintentional. Again, so you just run into the same people, right? And then you sort of, build relationships and really get to know folks. It's a great community of people. So it's a small community. That's why I say that, there's always a chance we're going to get to cruise together again someday.
Well, we look forward to it. Well, thanks for taking the time to spend some time with us on board the Disney Wonder with your and your family's cruise. Thanks for coming on and all you do for our podcast. Thanks for coming on and sharing your experiences on the Wonder in Disneyland. And we look forward to talking to you soon and hopefully being out there on the seas with you guys as well.
Always fun. Thanks, Steve.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Chad for coming on and sharing his and his family's experiences as they sailed on the beautiful Disney Wonder out of San Diego this past spring break. And then he and his family headed up to Disneyland for the first time. It was fun to get his take on thoughts on Disneyland, DCA, and just the Disneyland Resort area. And we look forward to having him back on after he and his family get back from the Disney Wish this summer. Well, if you're enjoying the show and you know others who would enjoy it as well, we sure would appreciate it if you'd pass the word along. That helps us get the word out in the Disney cruising, and just the Disney podcasting community in general. Thank you for each and every one of you who share this show with friends and others who might be interested. We'd also like to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. They help bring this show each and every week ad-free. If you would like to find out more about our Patreon program, you can go to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. Well, the spring break is kind of winding up and everybody's heading back home to get the kids through school before summer break. On behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL podcast, we want to wish you to be well, enjoy time with family and friends, and we'll see you next time on the DCL podcast. The DCL podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney.
All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.